Hey folks, happy holidays. Welcome to our final event of 2022, the No Code Marketing Workshop. I'm Cody Stover. I'll be your host today. I actually was telling Jacob before we hopped on here that I hopped on to Merriam-Webster's 2022 Words of the Year, the dictionary company, and I was really bummed that No Code, Low Code did not make it in as one of their 2022 Words of the Year. I think if you've been in tech, you've probably been hearing about No Code, Low Code a lot this year. Tools for building apps, building processes, building marketing campaigns. Really just in general, there's been this explosion of different tools and different functionalities for helping people who maybe aren't technical coders be able to do some pretty cool stuff with data and unlock a lot of that. So definitely let us know there in the poll kind of what your team is working on. All right, as we wait, some quick no-code stats. So this is kind of the state of no-code as we round out the year 2022. So this is from a survey that Zapier did, Zapier's data report. So they found that over half of marketing departments currently rely on no-code tools, so adoption pretty decent. And 50% of no-code users started using the tools in the last year. So pretty recent that a lot of folks have made this kind of an integral part of their tech stack. And the last stat here is 90% of users say that their company has grown faster by using no-code tools. So kind of to summarize, I think no-code has been rising all year in popularity, and it's something that people feel like are helping their businesses grow. So as we get into some of this stuff today, I'm excited to kind of keep the focus there on how can you accelerate stuff using, without having to tap into code, how can you move faster? And we're going to get into some cool examples there. All right, so we'll go ahead and jump in. For folks who maybe are Customer users, welcome. It's good to see you again. If you haven't heard of Customer and this is your first time getting acquainted with our platform, really quick rundown, we're a cross-channel customer engagement platform. So what that means is you can bring in all of your marketing messages, your newsletters, your automated messaging flows, and your data workflows all into one platform. So you can run those across email, push notifications, SMS. You can do a lot with in-app messages on both web and mobile. So you can kind of build these campaigns that mix in the best channels for your users and test which the best channels are. So on the flip side, the data workflows, I think most people start out by getting, your onboarding email flow set up at Customer. But as you go deeper as a user, there's so much you can do with webhooks to kind of, in a lot of cases, replace something like Zapier. If you want to update a CRM record when something happens in your system, you can kind of run that kind of data workflow logic in Customer as well. Real quick shout out, you can see there on the right, we work with companies across a lot of different industries. So wherever you're joining us from today, whether you're in fintech like Lemonade and Hi, you can see there on the right, SaaS, we work with Notion and Buffer. In the edtech space, we work with DataCamp. Whatever industry you're joining us from, I think we all have a need to send better, more relevant, personalized, engaging messages. And so we're happy to have you here, and we're happy to, share some of these examples, whichever industry you are with. Okay, so jumping in here, I want to give an intro to our guest today. Joining us is Jacob Zavita. He's a solutions architect here at Customer.io. He has some great background experience at work with big tech companies like ZoomInfo, House, and we're really appreciative to have him here on the Customer.io team, and also going to be sharing some examples today. His superpower, as I've phrased it, is doing cool stuff with data. So as we get into the event, we're going to kind of break down in a little more detail what cool stuff really is. But Jacob, thank you so much for joining us. Give us a quick rundown on what your role is here at Customer.io, and then also let us know when you work with companies, what's typically some no-code, low-code solutions that you typically help them with?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Cody. You're far too kind. Good to be here. What I really help people do at Customer.io is when they're evaluating the platform to figure out what are those key use cases for them and make sure, of course, that that's going to work and show them how they're going to do that, similar to how we're going to look at some examples today. And we'll also talk about integrations and those sort of things. And then you asked, where do I see people using low-code solutions?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, with segmenting and then automating those messaging campaigns. if we can remove the need for marketers to have to go to engineers, developers, data teams to pull lists, and just have that data coming into a platform that then they can act on as they see fit, and they don't need to involve those more technical roles in getting those, like that needle mover alone and just the time saved can be huge.
Love it. Yeah, and we appreciate having you on here to kind of demo through some of the stuff that
Sure.
you've seen be kind of carried out in a really cool way, in a way that's no code. I think as we see in the poll there, pulling segments and targeted audiences looks like the number one answer as far as our audience on what kind of things they're still relying on the dev team for. So as you mentioned, yeah, segmentation and that sort of thing. I'm excited. That's one of our examples we're going to get into. Just a quick little spoiler there. But as you see it, Jacob, like what this whole no code, low code movement, what is it and why is it even important, just to kind of set the stage before we get into the actual examples?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think what it's really about is creating tools that give people who don't have that kind of hard CS background. You don't need to know the ins and outs of a programming language to build something. And no code goes beyond just marketing automation. There's all kinds of tools that let people who, they're not technically minded necessarily. They may be, but they just don't have that. They don't need to know JavaScript. They don't need to know SQL. They don't need to know these kind of full programming languages to do things. And so the more, I think we've seen the last year, 2 years, just an explosion in companies prioritizing building tools that help people do this. And those stats you shared earlier were awesome. I hadn't seen those before.
Yeah, and conveniently, the audience has voted that pulling segments, target audience is something that still has some dev reliance. So this slide here, as you're kind of talking through that, we see on the left, there's a SQL query. You got to know that language to be able to kind of, pull that when you need to, or rely on your devs for it. On the right, we've kind of got more of a no code. This is actually inside Customer.io, a segmentation tool, a no code builder where you're using drop down menus where you can get somebody who's maybe new to the team up and running, creating granular segments right away. So yeah, I definitely myself as a user really appreciate no code tools, just the ability to move fast, test things quickly, iterate, move on. So I think it definitely helps there as well. All right, folks in the audience who are just joining us, thanks so much for logging in. And we're going to do a quick look at the agenda here, and then we're going to be off to the races, getting into the good stuff. So first and foremost, everybody give yourself a pat on the back for showing up today and closing out the year in a growth mindset. I know we're almost into the holidays, so it's good to see you. I'm glad to have everyone here for one more event. So the golden question today we're going to answer is, how can marketers build data-driven campaigns and segments without need for a developer? So we'll kind of look through a few different examples that Jacob's going to show us, but we're going to first kind of drill down into a hyper-targeted segment. We're then going to look at a behavior-based messaging campaign that adapts based on certain user behaviors. And throughout the whole thing, we're kind of going to talk about cross-channel growth hacks, ways to use event data, ways to use event and attribute data, and then also using email, push, SMS, in-app messaging channels in Harmony. So that's where we are going to go. For everybody who is here, please let us know in the chat. I see there's a couple people saying hello there, but let us know in the chat as we go, questions that you have. We're going to have Q&A time at the end, but I think Jacob and I both love to have questions while we go so that we can address stuff right in the moment and maybe show some follow-up examples based on that. So keep us involved there in the chat, and you can also use the little emoji react button if you just want to give a thumbs up or let us know something is looking good. Okay, so some quick background context before Jacob shares his screen and we get into the demo environment. We start talking through some real world use cases. On the topic of real world, the demo environment that we're going to be in today is not an actual company. It's a fake data demo environment. So everything you see, all the user profiles in there, it's all fake data. It's all dummy data. So just wanted to put that out there. We're actually basing it off of a kind of a real business model though. So the company that we're going to use today in the demo workspace is a SaaS company that we've made up called Sketcher.io. So imagine this is a design platform with kind of product design features, graphic design features, maybe similar to a Figma or a Canva. But so this company kind of has a product-led growth model. They've got a free product that you can get into, and then they really want to use Customer IO to help drive activation, get people to adopt the key sticky features in their product, and then retain them long term. So this company, there's a few, just to put it out there, a few activation behaviors that they value. So they want people to start a first project. They want people to export a first project from their platform. Those are some key behaviors that they're looking at. And then crucial to today's examples that Jacob's going to show, they really want people to be booking these trainings. They found that someone booking a training and completing a training is that sticky feature, that sticky action that helps, is correlated to somebody's long-term success in their platform. So that's just a little quick background that'll help kind of frame today's event. I think whatever data points that you value at your organization, kind of put those into the examples that I just showed. And I think you can take away a lot from the examples today. Okay, so Jacob, as you are getting ready to pull up your screen here, the background context that you have from your boss, let's say, is that right now Sketcher has a challenge with training, booking, and completion rate being really low, even though it's one of the features that they know needs to happen, one of the actions that needs to happen. So your challenge today, the thing you need to do is to increase training bookings and completion as we go through these examples. If you choose to accept, I should say.
Okay. We'll see, but I think I'm up for it.
Sounds good. Well, I'm going to let you share your screen. But first off, I just prefaced a bunch about data points that we care about with this fake company. So maybe if you share your screen and dive in, we could kind of take a look at where those data points even live, just so we get started into our examples.
Yeah. So, I mean, with this, the first thing we want to think about is how do we want to define that group of people who haven't booked the training and we want to drive to that training. And so before we go and build that in Customer IO, let's take a look at the data we have available in the platform. So in Customer IO, everything rolls up to a profile, a person ultimately. And so there's two data types on that profile. One is an attribute, right? So these are all these values that you are setting, you're tracking, you're defining, and you're sending into Customer IO. So maybe we want people who are they're active prospects, they're customers. Okay, so we'll take a look at the data we have available, make sure we're in the right workspace. And for events, that's the second data type. So events are those key actions people are taking on your website, in your application, or with your business that you want to use for triggering campaigns or even just for segmenting people. All this data, the event data and the attribute data, you can use for segmentation and the personalization of messages. So we'll want to see, okay, where's that training booked or training complete? In this case, we want to target people who haven't yet done that training booked event.
Awesome. So yeah, we're zooming in on those kind of key actions as the ones that we know we need to drive. So getting into our first example, Jacob, let's say, so there's this scenario that we kind of just discussed. We've got this training booked, training complete example. We know that people who aren't booking those trainings is the group that we want to engage. How are you going about in a no-code way how to segment these folks, and how granular can you get there?
Gotcha. Yeah. So what we'll want to do is we'll want to build a segment in Customer IO. And that segment is really just a group of people who meet those conditions that you've defined for that group. So what I'm going to do here is I'll kind of walk through what we have set up already, and then I'll show you all what the builder actually looks like and show you some more of the nitty-gritty segmentation capabilities with that. So we want to find people who haven't performed that training booked event. And you can do groupings in this. You can do AND logic or logic. You can nest those as you need to. So let's grab people who that CRM account status is active prospect or customer. We want both of those. And maybe we want people who have joined us relatively recently. So that created at is a timestamp after 60 days ago. So within the last 60 days. And then we can also segment based on how people have engaged with messages as well. So maybe they haven't marked any of our emails as spam, right? We know that they want to receive this stuff. They want to receive information from us. They just haven't taken that next step yet in booking a training. So when you have a segment live here, you of course can see a quick summary of who's moved into and out of that segment as we've gone along, how you're using that segment in Customer IO. So what campaigns are you using it in, what newsletters are you using it in, And we also have that add audience sync, right? So as people move into and out of segments, as they progress through, that life cycle of working with your business, you can also sync those segments with like the Facebook or Google ad audience. It's pretty cool. Let's now take a look at the actual segment builder. So earlier, Cody shared a screenshot of what this looks like, saying, hey, here's, instead of needing to pull a list and know a programming language, if you know what all that data is in Customer IO, you know those attributes, you know those events, you can now build that segment based off of that. So for events, of course, training booked has not been performed. You can say has been performed, and you can also refine that. So you can say X amount of times within the last X amount of days. And then if you're sending any data attributes associated with that event, maybe you want to find people who haven't booked that project management training. They've done the project build training, something like that. You can even sort out based on those attributes within that event. So you can get pretty detailed with this. And when it comes to
Jacob,
the attribute, please. No, please.
Oh, I was going to say, when you're working with folks who are maybe jumping into the segmentation builder like this, what's the no code advantage, or like, I guess, why is this no code view kind of more helpful than other ways that you've seen folks doing it?
Yeah, with this, you don't need to know a whole programming language. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to know that, but here you don't need to have that understanding. You just need to know, okay, what's the data I have? What are those attributes? What are those events? And then what are those groups I want to define based on that? So the main reason is, especially in here in Customer IO, there's a lot of different options for, the logic, right? So here we have, for like a string, text, or a number, right? Is it equal to something? Does it contain a certain phrase? And then you can base it off of timestamps also. You can say, like here we have that attribute created at is a timestamp after 60 days ago. And of course, you can go for a specific date. You can say before, after, or between. You can set a range. Lots of different ways you can do that. You can also base it off of how people have engaged with messages. So the three things are events, attributes, and messages. So you could grab emails, push notifications, Slack messages, SMS, webhook actions, or in-app messages that you're sending from Customer IO. You can say, hey, any email, or you could call out specific emails in specific campaigns. Has not, lots of different options. You want to see, have they clicked a link? Have they not clicked a link? In this case, we just want to sort out people who have marked spam. We don't want those folks. And we can refine that further, right? Like before, 1 time, 2 times within the last X amount of days. Get really detailed with it here.
Awesome. I know too, for folks in the audience, maybe who are just seeing Customer IO for the first time, or maybe you're a customer who uses this segmentation builder all the time, kind of using these drop downs to build things based off of events, attributes. You can even nest and or statements of, did they do this event or this event or this event? Jacob, for the advanced user, what if we want to go one step farther? I know some folks, a lot of folks have nested data models or are working with data that's kind of in that nested structure. What would you recommend there, or what could you show there?
Yeah, so we can, if you're saving, more complex data types like a JSON object, has a collection of data points within it, or even an array. It could even be an array of objects. Array is a list for those of you who aren't familiar with that. We can take that too, and we can segment down to any level of data within that also. So let's take a look at somebody. I think I had someone pulled up beforehand who has one of those. No, it was this person, excuse me. Just looking at their attributes down the side. Yeah. So say we have projects created. Maybe you're saving a list of each project they've created in your site. So we have their name, the number of assigned users, and then even that assigned users is a nested array of objects. And maybe we have a couple of those. So let's say we wanted to find somebody who had someone set as a viewer for their project. How would we do that here? We want to grab that project's created. And instead of is equal to or something like that, we want to grab that array, because it's a list of objects. So it says that we're at least one. Where do we have that then? Assigned user, and then down to role. So we're assigned user, and that's also an array where the property role is equal to viewer. Just confirm. Project created assigned users role. Perfect. Right. So that way you can drill down as far as you need to go. If we had to go to further levels, we could. And so with this method, yeah, you need to know how that data is structured. You need to know kind of how to get down into that. And then if you are more comfortable writing dot notation, we have that as an option for you as well. If you know where it is, you can just knock it out and type it out, no problem. So a couple different ways to drill down into those more complex data types.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jacob. I think
Sure.
For anybody in the audience, I know Jan asked earlier, what would be amazing to still run SQL inside of Customer.io when no code solution doesn't allow for certain detailed level of segmentation. I think like as you're walking through this more advanced example, this is kind of the spot where you get a lot of that flexibility. Maybe it's not writing SQL right in here, but you can get really drilled down as deep as you want to into some of these arrays. And I think also for folks who, as we were going through that nested data structure, who were like, whoa, this is a little too far.
Yeah.
I'm getting freaked out. Don't worry. I think the most common way that folks use Customer.io is starting with kind of this basic using events and attributes in tandem. And then the nice thing is when you do feel like you're reaching that advanced or want to go a little farther, you can kind of get into this deeper properties here and create that nested type data structure segment.
Totally.
I think we had one more question maybe in the chat. Caitlin, you were asking about in your data index, you have all attributes currently and no events. So changing attributes to events. I think we're going to get into the visual workflow builder here in a moment too, and we might be able to kind of address that. But yeah, so we'll get to that one. And let's see, anything else to look at? Are there limitations when it comes to a JSON array of objects where you can't query two keys within the same object?
Can't query two keys within the same object.
Any thoughts there? We're getting some good questions.
Yeah. I would. Okay, so if they're two different keys, then I'd say those are two different attributes, right? And if I'm not correct, feel free to if you're thinking of something else, Jan, feel free to email me. But that's kind of what that sounds like to me there.
And so Felix also asks, so segmentation is created as JSON, not SQL.
No, so the segmentation engine is just looking at the attributes and the events. So it's just looking at what are those values. As those values are changing, are people then moving into and out of varying segments? So I wouldn't worry so much about the if it's SQL or JSON. It's really our engine just evaluating the data that's in Customer.io. What this is down here is if you are saving an attribute as a JSON object or an array, right? If that's how it comes in from your database, you can segment based off of nested data points within that. Does that make sense? I asked that and I realized you don't have yeah. So if it makes sense, just let me know. Just give me a thumbs up, Felix.
Thanks for all the questions, folks. Keep them
sure.
coming. We're gonna move into the next part of this example too here. We went deep here on segments. So if we think back to kind of the scenario that we're running, we wanted to capture this group of people who weren't drip booking these trainings, who weren't taking that key activation milestone. So Jacob, great job. You've captured this group of people. The next step is we want to actually engage this segment. So talk me through how you're kind of triggering campaigns based on this segment and kind of nurturing them towards taking that first action.
Gotcha. Yeah. So someone moving into a segment, that's one of the trigger options for someone starting a campaign. So what we would do is you would create a campaign in Customer.io, and a campaign is a sequence of messages that someone starts when they meet those trigger conditions. So in this case, the trigger condition is someone's moved into that segment we just built. And you can layer other segments on top of that. You can filter people out based on that as well. You can even update the frequency. How many times should somebody enter this? Should they enter it every time they enter this segment? Just the first time? If they're still in it, do you want it to run again in a week? Lots of different options there. So that's the first thing, is decide what is going to trigger this segment. You can also trigger a segment if someone performs an event or something related to time. There's a handful of options for triggering that here. But for this one, when someone moves into that segment, we're going to start them through this campaign. So the actual campaign, right? The campaign builder, the workflow, where we're seeing what are those series of steps people are taking, or people are going to receive messages as we set them. So that's the second part of this. And before we dive into the details of this particular workflow, I want to think about what is the conversion goal for this campaign as well. So what we were trying to get people to do in this case is book that training. So like we saw here in the data index, we have that training booked event. So what we're going to listen for here is when someone performs that event after receiving any message from this campaign, we're going to mark them converted. And then we also want to mark the exit condition. So it's a handful of options here, but here, when they perform that conversion event, we're good. We don't need to then have them receive more of these messages. But there may be cases where, you want people to move through the whole campaign, right? Or if they, if they don't match the conversion event, but then they do match the triggers, then stop. Lots of options there. But with that conversion event and that exit condition, regardless of where someone is in the campaign, if they meet that exit condition, performing that conversion event, they'll exit from the campaign. So they won't get any more messages from this campaign. Yeah. Cody, awesome. Should I go into the details here?
Yeah, let's start talking about the details. I think I'd love to see kind of how you're creating campaigns that adapt to whether they have or haven't done that. I know in the conversion goal, you talked about how the campaign might move them out if they do perform the event, but do people always, book a training on the first one, and how are you kind of reacting to that?
Right. So I'll just walk through this from the top to the bottom. This isn't the only way to build this kind of campaign. Of course, lots of different options, very flexible, but just want to create an example for you all here. So the first thing we're going to do is use a time window. What this does is waits until that person has reached that time window. If you're tracking their time zone, excellent. You can match it to their time zone. Otherwise, you can set a fallback time zone as well. So once we're between 5:45 a.m. and 8 p.m. in their time zone, they're then going to move to the next step. And this next step is just an email that we've marked as an A/B test. So any message in Customer IO, you can make an A/B test. There's just a button here on the left-hand side that says make A/B test. And in this case, maybe we have one that's a little more direct in the call to action, another one that's a little softer. I'll only show you real quick some other ways we can kind of vary the content in a message based on a particular person's data attributes, what we know about them. So I'm here in our workflow builder, our drag and drop editor. So we have a few other editors. There's a HTML code editor, if you're comfortable with that. There's a rich text editor, but a lot of people like the drag and drop just because they're visual. It's low code. There's not a whole lot they need to know here. Drag the items from the right, pop them on the left, and we're set. Now, what's going on here? We have some curly brackets. What are we doing here? Well, remember we had two different values for that CRM account status, one of customer and one of active prospect. And maybe we want to vary what we say to them based on that attribute. So all this is using Liquid, which is a templating language you can use in Customer IO. It's pretty much saying if that attribute is customer, show them this. And if it's active prospect, show them that. And of course, we have guides on how to do liquid logic, but that's really just kind of like an if check. If it's equal to this, show this, that, show that. And let's show an example of what that's going to look like for a person. So for Rusty here, he's listed as a customer, so he's getting that customer message. I think I had one saved where they're a customer. I think they're a prospect. Yeah, so let's find them. Let's see what that one looks like real quick. Yeah, so they're a prospect. We're going to see that there. So that's one way you can vary the content of a message based on the data you have about that person. Just personalize it a little bit more. But if that is too much, if it's like, hey, what's this? We saw curly brackets. I'm a little uncomfortable with that. I just want it to work. Instead of using liquid in that, you can do a true false branch or a multi-split branch based on that attribute. You could say if we're equal to customer, put it on the left-hand side. If it's the other condition, they'll go down the right-hand side. And if you have multiple values, make sure we don't delete anything too important. We have that multi-split branch. So maybe there's 3 or 4 or 5 different ways we want to split people based on the value of that account status attribute.
Kind of a lot of different ways you could do it. Based on, do you recommend using message personalization versus branching? Is there any scenario where you want to use one over the other?
So if you want to see how those messages convert for those 2 different groups, I would split them into different branches, right? But here in this case, if you're just testing, like the call to action or the subject line or something like that, and you just want to vary the content of that one part of the message to people based on, their account status, then that's fine. But if that's something, you're testing, then I would split them differently with one of those branches beforehand. Yeah.
And then the conversion.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we got a lot of splitting going on down here too,
yes.
Based on wait untils. Talk us through kind of what's going on here. And also I see some multi-channel, cross-channel going on.
Exactly. So after we sent that first message, we're going to put them in a wait until step. Now, a wait until step is my favorite workflow action in Customer IO, just down here. Because what we're doing is we're waiting for one of a number of conditions to be met before we move them to the next step, and we can actually branch based on those conditions. So let's say if they click the link in that email, right? So instead of any email, we'd grab the specific email. Yeah, so we'd grab that. If that link in that first email has been clicked, I'm going to route them down that first path. Or the second one is if they log in. If they log in, route them down the middle path. If they haven't done either of those things after 2 hours, that's the third path. So for that second path, we have another wait until condition that's waiting for a certain page view event. So you can also send page view events into Customer IO. So if they view that page view event, route them down this side. Maybe that's the registration page for the training. They're at where we'd like them to be to take the next step. If they log in and they haven't done that after 3 minutes, we'll move them to the next action. And in this case, we know they're on the website. They've performed that login event. They're just not on that registration page. Maybe we then send them an in-app message. So I just want to give you a quick sense of what the in-app message kind of builder looks like. Right, so you build them in the content section of the site, and then you have the merge tags here as you need them, so you can make them more customized. So that here's what you learned, the register here, call to action button, and maybe the headline as well. Of course, you can update the priority of those messages if you're sending multiple ones, decide what device types do we want to send them to, or do you want it to be positioned on the page? Lots of different options for in-app here. Great, so that's that second branch. The third branch, though, is, hey, if we sent that first email and it's been 2 hours, it really could be any amount of time, but in this case, 2 hours, what do we want to do? Well, let's send them a message through another channel. So first, we're going to send them a push notification or an SMS based on whether or not they have a device registered, if they have that mobile app. If they do have the mobile app, send a push notification. Push notification is pretty simple to use as well, right? The title, kind of that headline, the message, you can add images, you can add deep links, you can even add custom data if you need to. And real quick, see, how is it going to look like on different sort of notification types here. If they don't have that mobile app, let's send them an SMS message. Again, Builder's very simple. Track that customer phone number attribute, and then put in your message here. Get a preview of how it's going to look, and you can add images to those as well, and send WhatsApp messages also. So that's just from the first few hours of entering this campaign. We wait till a time window, we send the first message, we then see how they react to that message. We have a handful of conditions to then message them in the right place at the right time accordingly.
For folks in the audience too, I hope kind of you're mentally making the connection here too between these key actions that we're showing for this fake company Sketcher. You probably have your own list of, as we looked at that wait until, where you could decide a few different conditions based on actions that they take, kind of what your mental model is of the key behaviors that you care about for your customers. And I think too with cross-channel, a lot of folks I talk to have the question of like, what channel should I use at what time? There's probably some similarities across businesses, like mobile. Maybe you're using more SMS push notifications, but at the same time, sometimes those channels can be intrusive if you overuse them. Too much notifications on your customer's phone. So I think just to chime in with a little extra context there, Jacob, too, I think as you're kind of walking through that, I'm thinking of what channels are best. Mm-hmm. And folks in the audience would love to hear too in the chat if there's any channels that you want to talk more on or hear more about. But I think really, when in doubt, test it out. We're going to talk testing here in just a second.
Sure.
But there's no way to really know until you start sending messages, start getting customer feedback, start seeing which ones have higher open rates, click rates, conversion rates, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah. So after that, we're going to keep it.
Sorry to cut you off.
Totally good. After that, we're going to keep it a little more simple. We're just going to use a time delay, which instead of waiting for something to happen, we're just going to say, let's put them in this wait step for a day. You can see, again, just dummy data running through this, but we have a handful of people in that wait step right now. Once they exit that time, send the next message. In this case, an email. Maybe we'll wait another day, and then we want to send different messages to them based on that CRM account status. So using that multi-split branch, right? If someone has the value of active prospect, put them down this branch. If someone is a customer, send them down this one. Always good to have a fallback just in case as well. In this case, though, because the trigger segment is going to be people who have either of those two values for that attribute, really no one should be receiving this. I know we looked at this earlier, but yeah. And again, you can make these as long or as short as you need to for the campaign. And if at any point, whether it's from that first message or that second message, they register, they perform that training booked event, they'll exit from this campaign and they'll be marked converted in your metrics.
Wonderful. What if I know we showed simple A/B testing? Sometimes when I talk to folks, they are saying, I don't want to test just one message. I kind of want to test one experience versus another experience. Gotcha. Like a whole batch of messages versus another batch of messages, and which one converts higher. Talk to me about that. How would you recommend approaching that in this campaign?
Yeah, so that's pretty simple. You would just use what we call a random cohort branch. And what that's going to do is send people randomly into these different paths. So this isn't based on a value or an attribute or something they've done or haven't done. This is just random. So if we want to test the whole experience, we're just going to highlight all of that and then plug it into. Okay, it's giving me a little. It's live, right? So it's just giving me a warning. You're going to move delays into this. We'll be fine though. It wouldn't exit those. Yeah, we still have those 19 people in that first step. So now we have, a third of people are going to go through this one. And we can decide what we want to do with these other paths as well. So whether there are specific elements we just want to replicate, we can do that. We can also copy message sequences and blocks of steps from other campaigns and pop those in as well. So there's a certain sequence of messages you know has worked from other places. You can just easily grab those from other campaigns in your Customer IO account.
I think I've seen this play out too with folks who maybe are releasing a new onboarding flow. Maybe they've had their traditional onboarding flow for the last 2 years. It works pretty well, and you're a little afraid to really fully move away from it, even though you think your new flow or new design maybe looks better, is better, more relevant messages, but you've got this old flow that's kind of been your bread and butter. How do you kind of make that transition and really prove out that the next one works well? So I've seen the cohort branch kind of be a great spot for you to try a new campaign, really prove out that it is going to convert higher than the old one, and maybe you find out it doesn't convert higher. So that's when you can actually say, hey, we're sticking with the old one because it works. So
well, and for a live campaign, we have the metrics available also. So I was on this build tab here with all those sort of workflow action items we can plug in. But if I go to metrics, right, we can see how are each of these messages and paths performing. Again, no real dummy data in this one. But if it was a live campaign actually going to people, you'd be able to select, okay, what are those different data points we want to see? And again, you can see it for each path as well. And then at a higher level, for a live campaign, we have that metrics tab. And again, if we were actually sending messages, we'd see how are people opening them, sending them, clicking them, any of those data points we want to track here, as well as any tracked links, how each of those messages are performing as well. So you have it in more of like a table format on top of that. Of course, you can export that too, have that sent down into any analytics tools or databases for further analysis if you like also. But also some easy ways to see how are these actually performing.
All right, Jacob, we have 15 minutes left, and I know we have one more example. So, and I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. So, this final scenario. So let's say that you've got this activation campaign running great. It's getting people to book a training. Your boss is happy. Great. We're getting people to book the training. I think the other portion is actually getting them to complete it. So in this last example, let's talk through how we're taking somebody from actually booking the training to making sure that they're reminded, they know when the training is, they come to it, making sure that completion step happens.
Gotcha. So what we'll want to do is we'll want to create another campaign outside of this one here that's triggered when someone performs that training booked event. So here I'm in another campaign altogether. This one actually hasn't been launched. So the top looks a little different to create it. So this is triggered when someone performs that event. Again, we have those filters, frequency options as well. And for this one, the goal and exit is going to be completing the training. So whether you're sending that as an attribute or an event, you can have the conversion be an event or someone entering or leaving a certain segment, right? And in this case, because this is going to be a reminder campaign and a follow-up campaign from that training, we don't want people to exit. We want them to move through the whole thing. So with that in mind, you'll notice this one looks a little more straightforward than the last one as we have it now. We have a few branches in here, but not the kind of branching we had like the last one, right? So this one, they're triggered when that training booked event occurs. First thing we want to do right away is send that confirmation. So as soon as we receive that event, they'll receive that email. And then we're going to use the wait until condition. What we want to do is, let's say we want to send a message 2 days before to remind them, then 20 hours before, and even 2 hours before. So for each one of those, that's going to be its own wait until. Now, when we were looking at the wait until before, we just had the conditions options. Are people performing events? Have they met certain attribute conditions? And we had time, right? Wait 2 hours to pass. In this case, because it's an event triggered campaign, We can also wait until we've reached a time in relationship to maybe a timestamp you include in that event. So in this case, maybe you're sending the time that the event actually starts. So we're going to select that attribute there and say 2 days before that. You can also go at or after days. You can go minutes, hours, or weeks. So, but 2 days before that, we're going to move them from this step into the next one. So maybe we want to send an email about how to prepare for your training. And then 24 hours before, send them a 24-hour reminder. And then maybe 2 hours before, want to send either an SMS or a push notification, again, based on if they have a device registered with us, if they have a mobile app. So for this next one, that's based on when they've actually started the event. Yeah.
Awesome. And I think too, like for folks who maybe have received reminders for this webinar and stuff after this webinar, we're kind of building those flows off of this similar type of event data. So saying when the event ends, let's trigger this follow-up message to you afterwards with your personalized follow-up link, some other resources, et cetera, et cetera. So
Sure.
Lots of use cases for this. I think a lot across a lot of different industries. Jacob, just to clarify too, so we started out by using the training booked event with some of that data on when the training date is, and then we're building this flow relative to that training date and when the person signed up. Is there ways to mix in, maybe there's other complementary events or actions that your customers are taking while this is happening that you also want to reference?
Sure. Yeah.
How can you bring in other types of events into this flow as well?
Yeah, so this particular wait until, what I was thinking is, let's say we wanted to send a message to somebody if they haven't joined the training yet. So we have a wait until branch here that's either waiting for people to join that training. That could fire an event, in which case they would just go down this route. They don't receive a message. Or we wait until 3 minutes after that start time, and then we can send that SMS. So that way, only the people who haven't yet joined the training will receive that text message or that message. Anyone who has, they're in the training, they're engaged. We don't need to send them something else. And it does a similar thing with sending a follow-up message. So maybe we want to get feedback on the training or send a recording of the training if they've completed it. So if we receive an event, if you send an event to Customer IO for training completed, they'd go on the left-hand side and we can send that message that's more geared towards that. If they haven't done that, they didn't complete the training, they didn't attend the training, maybe 22 hours or a few hours after the training date, we send a message saying we missed you. And then even that we could have trigger its own series of kind of re-engagement campaigns from there. But in this case, yeah, those first messages are just based off of the data in that training booked event. But if you're sending other events in relationship to that thing, that training, that appointment, whatever it is, you can also use the true false branch to kind of listen for if those have occurred or not. And if they haven't, you can handle it differently to follow up. Yeah.
I think what I love about this kind of functionality from a no-code standpoint, as somebody who is not a coder, I'm easily able to build out this. If I wanted to build a new flow for our webinar reminders, for example, folks who came today, you get in here and it's really logic based. Like if I'm saying, I want to do this to someone who has attended and I want to do this to someone who hasn't, simple logic based decisions, but you're really able to like tap into each of those events as you go, kind of customize it. Jacob, I want to throw a couple curveballs at you here real quick before we get into questions, but what if, I know like a use case in healthcare is somebody books a doctor's appointment or a telehealth appointment. Maybe they need to reschedule, or maybe they have multiple appointments. You have one appointment with one specialist, one appointment with a different specialist.
Gotcha.
How are you kind of handling those edge cases where maybe there's a reschedule or there's multiple appointments?
Yeah. So each time somebody performs that event, it will trigger its own instance of this. Right. So if, like I have had to go to PT recently, and the first time I went, I think they booked all my appointments for the next 8 weeks. So I was getting all these different reminders as those were all coming up. So you do the same thing here. So for each of those kind of appointment events, that would run its own instance. But if somebody cancels or reschedules or something like that, you'd want to send those as their own events and just create that as a condition to listen for. So maybe we have canceled or rescheduled. And those would in turn start their own branches. So of course, then we would drag everything we have here and pop it into that event time. And then maybe for these, if they perform those cancellation or reschedules events, those would start their own campaigns. All we want to do here is end them from this campaign. Yeah, so for each one of those wait untils, you'd want to do that because we want to listen for has a cancellation happened, has a rescheduled happened, something like that. And what we also want to do is if you're doing that, right, there may be, we want to exit them from the right instance. I would have, 8 weeks, 16 of those appointments. We want to make sure we pull them out of the right one. So what we can also do is for those change events, is we can also make sure it's for the right appointment. So maybe you're tracking some type of unique number, appointment number or ID, something indicating it's this particular appointment. We can make sure that the appointment number of the cancellation or the reschedule event is equal to that training book. That way, we make sure we're exiting someone from the correct one. So that's I know that may be a little advanced. However, we just want to make sure we're moving people from the correct one. And so now with that, someone could book any number of appointments. We could send all the right reminders for them. We could exit them when they need to, based on whether they've rescheduled or canceled that appointment.
Yeah, I appreciate you walking us through that, Jacob. I think you referenced kind of a healthcare example. We've all had those moments where maybe you get a smattering of reminders and you're trying to figure out, wait, was this for that appointment or that appointment or that appointment? So lots of control here to kind of make that experience exactly what your customer.
I got to get my dentist on here. I tell you, man. two calls days before, text message confirmations. I'm like, guys, it's on my calendar. I'm good.
All right. Well, we got 5 minutes left. We're coming here to the finish. I want to just have a quick moment for questions at the end. But Jacob, first off, thanks for walking us through all of those examples. I think it was awesome to kind of see it go from start with the segment, tapping in a no-code way to kind of like the events and attributes, the data points that matter. Maybe if someone's a growth marketer or a product manager in charge of growth, you're really trying to get people to those first activation conversion steps, like booking the training. But then folks who maybe are on the marketing operations side of things, who are really operationally just trying to make sure that the right reminders go out. We saw that kind of appointment flow. So I appreciate you kind of taking us through a full story there. Yeah.
I'll just real quick, I'll go from the bottom up. Pablo, can you test a campaign in a sandbox environment and then move and copy it into production? Yes. So you'd want to have your sandbox and your production in different workspaces. You want to have one for sandbox, one for production. And then once you've built it out and tested it in sandbox and you're ready to move it in production, you'll need to first just create that kind of shell of that campaign. But then when you get to the workflow builder, just hit copy from workflow up here, switch to the correct workspace, grab the right campaign, and then copy the items you want to bring over from there. Really easy to copy those elements over from the other workspaces.
And a great workflow too. Love to build it out somewhere safe, and then you can move it into your live environment after.
Shimoida says, do you have a no-code, low-code roadmap for 23, especially for the HTML editor and for adding snippets? So our roadmap is available. If you're a customer, you can just, I'd say, ask your point of contact to see that. There's a publicly available one. I know from I don't want to speak too far ahead of myself here, but I know we did make an acquisition of a company called Parcel that is an HTML code editing tool. And so some of those changes from Parcel have already been added. So is there anything specific on the roadmap for that right now? No, but I would definitely keep your ears open for changes to that down the road.
No, Jacob, we had one question from Caitlin at the start where she was
Okay.
talking about turning an attribute into an event. I know we just have another minute, but is that something you can talk through real quick?
Turning an attribute into an event. So what you could do is, well, one, if you can send it into Customer IO as an event instead of an attribute, that's probably going to be best in the long run. However, if there are certain things that you then, when an attribute is a certain value, send an event, what you'd want to do is create a segment based on the value of those specific attributes. So if that account status is equal to active prospect, and now we want to send them an event, they would enter that segment as the trigger, and then you'd use that send event action here to then send an event based on that. So you would give it a title, you would move in create the attributes in the data section for that. So maybe we want to add the first name of the trainer, their last name. Oh, no, we don't want to make the name of it Chloe. I think you got what I was trying to do there. All right, so you can move those attributes. Yeah, let's move the attributes over instead of the events, like I had there. And you can build it out that way to do it. But in the long run, I do think it's better if you can to send those particular things over as events from your app, from your website, from your system to be able to do it that way. But this is a workaround you could use in the meantime.
And yeah, I think that's the beauty too, is maybe that there's a way that you want to set it up, but maybe your developer team says, yeah, we got a 2-month backlog, so I'll get that to you in March of next year. And you're like, no, I need to test this week for my boss.
Yeah.
So yeah, the great news is you can put that into the developer queue to get that help, but you can also hop back into a low code tool like this and kind of build that out as you need it for the time being. So lots of flexibility. All right, well, we are 1 minute over time. Appreciate everybody in the audience for showing up and asking some great questions. Jacob, thanks so much for walking through a couple of great use cases, and appreciate you coming on the event.
Hey, Cody, this was a blast, and I appreciate you having me.
Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming to our events here in 2022, and we'll see you in 2023. Cheers.